For some time, federal officials had resisted publishing their regulations for the public, arguing that the government wasn't in the newspaper business. But Justice Brandeis had long urged more transparency, and some say his questions at oral argument sealed the deal. Soon afterward, the government agreed to create the Federal Register and publish there every new regulation it produced. Fast forward about 80 years, I was sitting as a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals in Denver. The federal government had accused a Kansas home health care company called Caring Hearts of fraud. Never a light matter, a charge like that threatened the firm's future. For 6 years, the dispute had dragged through layers of administrative and judicial appeals. By the time it made its way to my court, Caring Hearts had lost at just about every turn. But as my colleagues and I dug into the case, we could hardly believe what we found. Yes, Caring Hearts' conduct defied current published regulations, but the company had followed the rules in place at the time it had acted. Quite simply, Caring Hearts stood accused of breaking rules that hadn't yet existed. How could a case like that carry on so long and make it so far? It turned out that the government produces such a large number of rules at such a furious clip and with such complexity that even the agency officials responsible for them had become confused. I think it was then that the idea for this book began to take hold in my mind. It wasn't just that I had experienced my own version of the hip pocket incident. The episode led me to reflect on my years as a judge and realize that I had seen many, so many cases where the sheer volume and complexity of our laws had swallowed up ordinary people. The pattern repeated itself in the years that followed. The man who is told he can't see the evidence officials are relying on to reject his application for Social Security benefits. The veteran who is denied disability benefits because he fails to apply quickly enough for the taste of the Department of Veterans Affairs, even when Congress has instructed the agency to accept applications like his as timely. The immigrant who follows the law and is still refused a place in this country because the government changes the rules of the game on him retroactively. I could go on. As cases like these passed through my courtroom, I found myself thinking back to a speech that Václav Havel, the first democratically elected president of Czechoslovakia, gave as a dissident in 1965. More than 2 decades before the fall of the Berlin Wall, the country was in the grip of communist rule. At the time, Havel observed that Prague was experiencing a rash of peculiar events. Window ledges from old buildings kept falling on people's heads. Often after those episodes, some official or media personality would publish an article observing that while of course no one wants plaster plummeting on people, readers should focus on the larger questions facing mankind and marvel at the progress of their society as a whole. Articles like these, Havel remarked, were the product of the purest of intentions. But they also contained a false logic, one that separated thought from any contact with the reality of ordinary people and their lived experiences. Prague's window ledges struck me as a kind of metaphor for what is happening in our law. Often enough, men and women going about their lives with no intention of harming anyone are getting thwacked unexpectedly and at times haphazardly by our multitude of statutes, rules, regulations, orders, edicts, and decrees. Almost always, one authority or another replies that while the impact on the individual at hand is most regrettable, we should really focus on the greater good our laws and regulations seek to achieve and the collective social progress they promise. But what do events and responses like these tell us about the health of our legal edifice? Before putting pen to paper, I wanted to spend some time studying in more depth the trends in our law that I saw playing out in individual cases. By the end of that process, I came to appreciate that during just my lifetime, our laws and regulations have exploded in number and have come to reach much more deeply into our daily lives. None of our institutions is immune from this development. Law has